Yo, what is going on, everybody? It's Brave Cat here once again with another Frontier Signals update. So let's run through everything for today, and I'm going to be looking at quite a bit of data here from the whole past week when it comes to the earthquakes, because, well, even though we've had pretty quiet conditions so far, we do have those sunspots that are coming to face Earth more and more over here, and it kind of looks like with everything going on, between those three fields, so including volcanism, we could start to see some kind of perfect storm brewing here. And I'll go into that more when I cover the earthquake section. So let's actually take a quick look at the magnetic field line images, and the ones here at the bottom with the 1600 and 1700 angstroms here. These are really good for viewing the magnetic field lines. You can get a really clear picture. And so we have these two active regions on the left that are coming into view, and you can see just how magnetically connected they are to each other as well. So when we look at the magnetogram, we can see them on here. So at the northern facing section, we have pretty large sunspots, but we don't have a whole lot of magnetic complexity, so that's at least good. But then we look at the southern section, and they look like they're relatively smaller sunspots overall, but the region itself does look a bit more magnetically complex. So we have these blue regions and these orange regions kind of interconnected with each other. And so when you see that, then that can definitely lead to some more flaring. And then since these two regions seem to be pretty magnetically connected with each other, and I'm not an expert on this, but it's just kind of, I guess, what feels like would make sense if, say, there is some sort of plasma filament in between these regions, then we could see a pretty decently sized plasma filament eruption if those two magnetically connected regions do something in between them. So I'm not sure if that's fully how that works, but that's just kind of what seems like could be a possibility. Again, if we have plasma filaments in between those regions, which right now, just from what I know, it doesn't look like that's the case, but these things are looking pretty active, and they are looking like they're rearing to go. And with that being said, taking a look at what's left on the far side of the sun here, so we still do have a couple of pretty large regions here on the far side of the sun that have yet to actually come into view. So by the time that these current regions here are somewhere maybe closer to directly Earth facing, then we are also going to be dealing with these two other regions on here, which they do look pretty sizable. This pink one especially seems to kind of stretch pretty far. And again, I think this pink region, we had a far side eruption just yesterday or the day before, so they seem to be active as well. And again, we're just gonna have to wait to see what those look like when those come to face us, and that is definitely going to kind of ramp things up, especially on the earthquake level. So let me just start to get into some of that really quickly here. We're gonna go to earthquake 3D, and I pretty much have a bunch of different feeds loaded. So there's going to be a few duplicate earthquakes, but hopefully not too many. And this is for the whole past week. Now, when we look at the Canada feed, that's going to be the last 30 days. Just want to mention that. And then as we go down here near Australia, so New Zealand, this earthquake feed is the last 150. But if we take a look at the global incident map, which shows a pretty complete picture here, we do see at New Zealand there is a ton of earthquakes here, and this is in the last 72 hours. So this should actually be pretty accurate to what we see for pretty much the whole week of activity down in New Zealand. And so this is looking pretty heavy, although, I mean, there is quite often a lot of activity going on here. Deep activity and tremor activity with a few larger events in the mix. Again, there's still a pretty deep, I think it was a 5, that is still not showing up here on the north end. So this again happened, let's see, was it this one? Maybe not. I think it was down here somewhere. Well, there was, oh yeah, it's not going to show up on here because this is the last 72 hours, but there was a sizable deep event that happened right after the 7. So if we go over to that, now again, there's some duplicates on here. So the earthquake, or the Australian feed, shows earthquakes without depth. So that's why you see another 7 here that appears to be shallow, but it's actually just the same thing. And speaking of Australia, I didn't notice this because I just pulled up the Australian feed today, but there does seem to be quite a swarm happening down here at the southwesternmost tip of Australia. So I was going to do a little bit of digging on that, and I couldn't find much beyond the, I guess, the Google AI thing. So it seems like there has been an ongoing swarm since roughly the beginning of January. So this is definitely something to look out for. Basically it says, earthquake swarms are not too common in that area, but it is known to be seismically active. And I guess from the little that I do know about this region, so we have the main plate boundary, and I can turn on the ugly map here really quickly just to show that. We do have the main plate boundary that goes kind of down south around it. So Australia does get pretty lucky when it comes to a lot of these major seismic events in this region, because they do not, they're not right on top of a major plate boundary. However, it seems like most of the activity, at least the noteworthy stuff that happens, tends to happen either on the east to southeast side or on this region over here. And it's probably just because there's some kind of more minor fault zones that run along here in the water. So just a little heads up there could be something building up here in the southwestern tip of Australia, especially if this swarm has been ongoing for essentially the last 2 months. So again, I only just now looked at this today, so I'm not sure what it's been doing for the last 2 months. But that's pretty much what we got there. So let me just take a couple of these off now that I covered those locations. So let's take off New Zealand, take off Australia. Now we're just going to be back to how I usually have it. That was just to give a better idea, a more complete picture of what we got going on throughout the entire plate. So there is, over the last week, a lot of pressure building up, especially with these deep earthquakes. So we got deep events down here, the deep 7, and then there's also deep events going up here into Japan and into Kamchatka and into the Aleutian Island chain of Alaska. So pretty much this entire plate has had deep events as well as moderate 5s to even, some 6 level activity here and there. But then we haven't actually had a whole lot of stuff happen since then. So we had another deep event up here, but then overall, there was a little bit of a period of quiet, and then things seem to be potentially ramping up again. And that plays right into the kind of perfect storm of events with the sunspot regions, because as we know, if we get a sizable solar flare, that is definitely going to trigger earthquakes. And so if the whole global system here, especially in the Pacific, is already spring-loaded with seismic pressure, then all it's going to take is for one tap from the sun to potentially unleash something major. So we're already still looking for a major event to happen in this region here. And if the sun takes a role to make that even worse, then that's pretty much going to be guaranteed of having some pretty large earthquakes happening within the next week or two. So just going to put that out there. And even going into Europe, things are looking more than usual. So let's take that back to the last 7 days, or at least on this feed. I think it also goes for the last 100, so it's a little bit harder to tell exactly the time frame we're looking at here, but it seems pretty reasonable that this would be roughly the last week. It's at least a lot easier to kind of compare that to 7 days rather than the Canada feed, which is the last 30 days. So this, I'm going to be taking this off of the feed as well, because it definitely gets quite cluttered here. But looking at the United States, we have had some 3-level activity going all the way across the whole United States now. So we had a 3 happening down here. Let's see, where is this? South Carolina. So that seems like a pretty rare spot for an earthquake, even if it's just a 3. Still pretty significant when we see 3s happening pretty much all across the board here, at least in some places. So we have definitely pressure moving throughout this entire region, and coming from up here, all the stuff going on in the Alaska area, especially with this stack of earthquakes here. I mean, going through the whole week, this thing basically just goes and just keeps going. I can't even see the top of this stack of earthquakes here. It is mostly in the 2 and 3 range, but there is a lot of 4s in here as well, so we can just kind of slowly drag up the magnitude list here. So wow, even going into the 3 range, that's a lot of earthquakes. And then if we go into the 4 range, it simmers down, but that's still quite a lot of 4s, even a couple of 5s peppered in there. Pretty much all coming after that 6 that struck. So looks like we have a lot of stuff going on here in the North Pacific overall, and there's even some deep events mixed in there. So just reiterating that there is a lot of potential in the whole system right now for larger things to strike, and those earthquakes will basically reverberate out and affect all the other surrounding regions, going pretty much all the way around the world. So that pressure slowly drops off from 6s to 5s to 4s, and then eventually going out to 3s. And it does the same exact thing over here in the Americas. So we see 6s, and then we see 5s, and we see 4s, and then it trickles out to 3s and 2s going across the plate. So, and then we have South America here, which definitely has some volcanic activity. So I'll go ahead and cover that next. Oh yeah, and before I do that, I'm just going to look at the tremor map. So this is actually not the tremor map. This is the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network. This is their earthquake map. And so pretty much everything that's a circle or a dot is everything reported pretty much only by them. And then these squares on here are reported by other agencies. So we see actually quite a lot of earthquakes that only this network reports. And so this has to do with this region. So upper west coast going into Canada here. And when I saw this, it kind of, again, puts things together a little bit more. You have to look through probably like a dozen different earthquake feeds to actually get the full picture. So, you know, when we combine everything that we're seeing from the west coast with these tremors, and the tremor map on here, again, is not showing anything, but if you go to their earthquake map, you actually do get some data available on here, and this is looking from, looks like the 12th to current, and I can't change that. There's no settings on here to actually view specific time frames, so we're just looking at roughly the last 2 weeks for all the earthquake events that have happened up here. So that definitely helps put things together, that there is quite a bit of pressure coming through here. So I just want to cover that really quickly here before I dive into the volcanoes, where there has been pretty significant uptick. Again, everything is all kind of related here. So again, if we see enhanced solar activity and flares coming at us, then we're going to see the volcanic systems also be quite agitated by that as well. But things have already kind of ramped up here as well. So there is a couple of eruptions I saw here on X. So we have Canleon, I think that's how it's said. And there's a couple different spellings for this, so if I try to look for it on here, I think it is this one, and it spells it with the C. It's kind of weird, but that is what happened there. So pretty significant ash plume coming out of there. We have another image here, shows it off pretty well. And then, yeah, see another spelling for it. And then this was a mud volcano that erupted in Colombia. So it was pretty spontaneous, pretty much looked like a giant fireball coming out here. I can just kind of refresh that. So that looked pretty significant there. And we do have quite a list on here. So we have Japan, Philippines, Indonesia. There's even three different ones out of Costa Rica in this list somewhere. It's down here a little bit further. So a lot of them coming out of Indonesia. Hawaii, of course, that one, Kilauea, has been going off like forever now. And then we have Alaska, Central Mexico, Guatemala. There's those three Costa Rica volcanoes seeing activity. Then we have Ecuador, Peru, and then that one in France. So pretty decent list of activity going on there for the volcanoes, and that could potentially get worse, especially with all these deep events as well. Even that one that happened near Italy. So again, those deep events are going to give us a pretty good reading on how to connect the volcanism and the earthquakes together, and then what we have going on with the sun in the next several days to the next couple weeks. Yeah, I think we're going to see potentially a kind of perfect storm brewing for all of these things to synchronistically happen all together. And the more you see how all these fields relate to one another, it becomes much less about coincidence, and it's all just, I mean, this is just how it all works, you know? So the sun impacts everything much more than anything else could, even human activity. So we pretty much have all the tools that we need in the modern age to figure this stuff out, even if there's a lot of resistance coming from establishments and agencies that, you know, do their funny business or whatever. But anyways, I think that'll about wrap it up. So try not to have anything too set in stone, but at the same time, I think literally tomorrow is going to be the day that I start hosting this website somewhere, and it is going to be available for anybody to access. So I'm pretty hyped about that. I just feel like pretty locked in that tomorrow is going to be the day this thing finally comes online. So pretty excited for that. Hopefully there's not too many issues I have to fix, but most of that is going to come from the mobile side of things. Now I'm thinking with the general layout and how I've already built this thing, it should be pretty mobile friendly. So there shouldn't hopefully be too much I have to do to get that to be nice and smooth. But this, you know, this is going to be a pretty big moment. So anyways, stay tuned. Please like and subscribe and share this video. It really, really helps. And so that'll be about it for today's update. Hope you all enjoyed, and I'll catch you all in the next.